In this video, I'll be running through the concept and the application of optimizing for 90-day profit contribution as opposed to maximizing for profit contribution at the time of purchase. I'll be giving away this model as well. And so if you want the model that I'll be using to run you through this, reach out to me on LinkedIn or send an email to sebastian@bluesensedigital.com.au and we'll send it through to you. So firstly, starting at the inputs, how does this work? Well, we have gross margin, average order value. We then have 90-day lift. What is 90-day lift? That is the percentage uplift in revenue or consequentially profit if we assume discount rates remain stable, which we will in this model. What is the percentage lift that we get? And so to see that, you can go into the cohort analysis within Shopify. You can switch over to amount spent per customer. You can look at the first order amount. So for this brand on first order, they make $104 in revenue. And then at month 2, which is the 90-day mark, how much lift is there here? So for context, first order is day 0, month 0 is day 30, this is day 60, and then this is day 90. And so we want to look at the difference between 131 and 104, which is 27. We can divide by 104, and that gives us 25.96% lift. And so that's how much lift we get in revenue from a customer within the first 90 days of them being acquired. And that's obviously being inputted right here. Now, what we've also done down here just to demonstrate this is that on day 0, the profit contribution of a new customer for this brand is $50 because average order value is $100, gross margin's 50%. This includes all cost of delivery, transaction fees, etc. And so we're making $50 in profit contribution on each customer we acquire. Fantastic. At the 90-day mark though, we're actually making $63 because we're getting an extra $13 in profit from a certain percentage of those people coming back and buying more and contributing more to the LTV. Fantastic. Now what we can do is we can model out daily spend. And so when we're spending $1,000 a day, $2,000 a day, $3,000 a day, etc., what is the expected acquisition there? And we can obviously model a decline. And you can do this using real data, which is what I would recommend, or you can do this just using your own back of the napkin math. And for the sake of this, I've just put random numbers in here to showcase the theory and the application behind this. And so at $1,000 in daily spend, we expect a 5 acquisition MER. Then this declines to 4.8, 4.6. And then at about $6,000, there's a bit of a sharp decline. And then it continues to decline linearly after. Now, what this ends up meaning is that our expected contribution profit, and let's just take the first line here, would be our revenue times our gross margin, which leaves us with gross profit. And then we minus off the ad spend and we get contribution profit. And so that's $1,500. Now, the thing is, we can also go and calculate at the 90-day mark. And so we include the lift and the extra revenue that we would get over the first 90 days of that customer being acquired. We do all the same math. And we are getting $2,150 in expected profit contribution. And now what you end up finding as you go and scale through increased ad spends is that the point of maximum profit contribution for this particular business that we're modeling here would be $6,000. At $6,000 in daily spend, we get $24,000 in expected revenue at a 4 acquisition MER, which maximizes our profit at $6,000. If we spend any more than this, what ends up happening is the MER goes incrementally lower to where we're not driving enough revenue to cover costs, and we actually start driving losses into the profit contribution. We have a video on this called Understanding This Concept Will Transform Your Profitability, which goes into incrementality in a little bit more detail as you're jumping up in tiers and eroding acquisition MER. And so the point here is that day 0 contribution profit, if that's what we're optimizing for, $6,000 in spend is the best level because that's going to get us $6,000 in profit a day. Now, comparatively, if we go to day 90, yes, we're going to get $9,000 in profit here. But as we continue to go up and stepstone through, we actually find that we make the most profit at day 90 when we go and spend $9,000 a day. And so this is why having clarity over what day you're optimizing to maximize profit for is an important concept to understand when you're looking at planning out budgeting on a month-on-month basis. Are we optimizing to make the most amount of profit initially, which is going to be best for your cash conversion cycle? Or can we afford to take $600 less profit per day now, but in 90 days time, we'll make an additional $22 per day in the future? Now, if you have relatively small lift, the answer is usually no. And the reason why the answer is usually no is because of the cost of capital. You are forgoing $600 now to then get that $600 recouped within 90 days, plus an extra $22 on top. Now, what is your access to capital? What is your current cost of capital? And how does that compare to being diminished $600, having to find that capital somewhere to continue to fuel the business and then have it repaid over a 90-day period? Now, if you're bootstrapped, this may be return on invested capital that you're happy with. But most people, you wouldn't be, particularly if you're loaning to buy inventory and spend on Meta. However, where this starts to become a lot more convincing is if you have significant lift over a longer time period. So most brands don't have incredible amounts of lift within the first 90-day period, but this brand specifically that we're looking at right here ends up with about 60% lift. And so if we go and model that in, you can now see that over a 12-month period, you are going to make an extra $800. And this is obviously per day that's going to stack up across the entire year if we're assuming daily figures here. And so the difference between spending $6,000 a day and $9,000 a day at the end of the year is an additional $800 times 365. So you'll be making an extra $292,000 in profit contribution across the year. And so that's a significant step change by changing the way that you're approaching budgeting and pushing out the point of optimization to the 12-month mark rather than day zero. Now, there's a lot of risk associated with optimizing your spend levels in your acquisition strategy on an assumption that you will get lift out of a cohort over a specific period of time. But obviously, that's a model that some people are happy to run. Now, we actually have a client that has 165% lift within year one, because they run on a subscription model. And so what ends up happening in this instance is it's even further exemplified. So you can see that in this case, the difference would be $25,800 if you were to run on the regular $6,000 budget, or you could nearly go and double budgets. And yes, you would have less profit initially, and so you would have to finance this in some capacity because you're likely not running very profitable here. But over the course of the year, you'll make this is $4,000 on the dot more. And so this ends up coming out to $1.46 million. Now, if I was running this brand, I wouldn't go and optimize towards day 365 contribution profit, just because there is so much risk associated with delaying realized revenue to that level. What if a recession hits and then suddenly returning customer revenue declines? And so you don't actually get the squeeze out of those cohorts that you initially hoped for. What if you go really hard on an acquisition and all the incremental customers that you layer in actually have worse retention than your average customer base that you were acquiring at lower budgets, and so you don't see the expected lift out of the total cohort? There's a lot of risks associated, and so I would personally sit somewhere in the middle. I would want to be a little bit more aggressive, forgo a little bit to get a gain that makes sense, but obviously you just have to run the numbers to see whether it makes sense to take a loss now to make more money in the long term. And I've got to visualize this down the bottom here too, which is on the yellow line, we have day zero profit contribution. And so you can see there's a point of, there's a local maxima, which sits at $6,000. And then on the green, you can see this local maxima sits a lot higher, up at, I believe this is $10,000. And so depending on how you're financing your acquisition depends on what game you can end up playing to be able to ultimately drive a better financial outcome at the end of the year. So once again, if you want this model to be able to tinker with these numbers, put your own numbers in, and get a better understanding of this concept, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or send an email to Sebastian@bluesensedigital.com.au.